بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم لا حول ولا قوة الا بالله العلی العظیم الحمد لله رب العالمین و صلی الله علی سیدنا و نبینا ابی القاسم المصطفى محمد و آله الطیبین الطاهرین لا سیما بقیة الله فی الارضین عجل الله تعالی فرجه الشریف اللهم اخرجنی من ظلمات الوهم و اکرمنی بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا ابواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of philosophical psychology, and today we start a new lesson on the movement or motion of the soul. This is the lesson 9 of the book. We had in the last 2 lessons of the book the discussion about createdness of the soul, حدوث النفس. Now we are talking about حرکت النفس, motion or movement in the soul. Before the author studies the topic of motion or movement in the soul, introduces different types of change that can happen. So there is a detailed discussion about different types of change. We will try to quickly review them, and then we will see, inshallah, what was peripatetic philosophers' view about the subject, and then what was the transcendent philosophy, and then what is the author's view. One way of classifying being is to divide it into متغير and ثابت. Every being is either changing or is unchanged. There is no third way. So these are ziddan. These are opposite to each other, and there is no third option. There is another classification which has a third option, because it is not ziddan, it is adamu malaka, and that is about haraka and sukun. Haraka is gradual change in something that can change. Sukun means lack of gradual change in something that can change. But if something cannot change at all, like wajibul wujud, then would be a third option. We don't call wajibul wujud mutaharrik or sakin, because even sakin is adamu malaka. For example, we don't say to a stone that it is blind, because blindness is not to be able to see when the subject can in general see. A stone can never see. Therefore, we don't say to a stone, because it cannot see, it is blind. A stone is neither able to see nor it is blind. Why? Because there is no suitability, there's no match between seeing and a stone. Wajibul wujud tabaraka wa ta'ala is neither mutaharrik nor sakin, because sukun is adamul haraka fima yumkinu an yataharrak. But we can say wajibul wujud is thabit, because taghayyur and thubat are opposite, and there's no third option. Then taghayyur is sometimes happening at once, and sometimes it is gradual. So we have gradual change and we have immediate change or sudden change. If it is sudden change, it can be divided by itself into two. Sometimes there is ما به الاشتراك, what is common. Sometimes there is no ما به الاشتراك, there is nothing common. ما به الاشتراك by itself can be one of the two. Either it is change in substance, we call it كون و فساد, generation and corruption. That is when surah, which is the substantial form, can change. The mud has a surah and that surah changes. This is in Jawhar because surah is Jawhari. But sometimes we have change in a'raz, in accidents. You can call it kawn و fasad, but you have to remember that this is kawn و fasad, which is in a'raz, not in Jawhar. Normally when they say kawn و fasad, they mean in Jawhar. Like when the color of a substance changes or the taste changes, for example. If there is no ma bihil ishtirak, there is nothing common, it can be one of the three. One is zawal, expiration. Something was existing, it doesn't exist anymore. Sometimes it's opposite. Something didn't exist, now it exists. Sometimes it's tajaddudul amthal. It's generation of something similar. So something expires, but something, not exactly the same thing, something similar, mithl, will come to existence. So these are all daf'i. But tadriji is dynamic, ongoing, which is haraka, it's motion, it's movement. This haraka can be jawhari. According to Mullah Sadra, we can have a haraka in Jawhar. It can be arazi, like what previous philosophers also accepted. Mullah Sadra, of course, also accepts, but he doesn't limit it to arazi. So, haraka is gradual change either in Jawhar, substance, or araz, accident. There is another way to classify haraka. One is al-harakatul imtidadiyya, a haraka which has continuity. This by itself is divided into ishtidadi or tada'ufi or mutashabih. Imagine, for example, a person is growing. His body is also growing in weight and in size. This is ishtidadi. Taza'ufi is like a person is losing weight. He's losing weight because of illness or oldness, being old, etc. Mutashabih means something expires, something else comes to existence, like when something is moving from one location to another location. So aradul ayn, which is about the location, is changing. And sometimes haraka, which is tadriji, is not imtidadi, is ghayr imtidadi. This by itself can be tawassu'i or tada'ufi or tazayyuqi. For example, a person is jahil, now becomes alim. Jawhar is the same, but ilm as kayf and nafsani as an accident is increased. Or one may lose knowledge. So it's tada'ufi. This is a very quick review of all different kinds of changes and motions, etc. Now let's go back to our main topic, harakat al-nafs, motion of the human soul. The first opinion that we want to discuss is opinion of Masha'in, peripatetic philosophers, who believe in in روحانية الحدوث و روحانية البقاء. They believe that nafs from the very beginning comes as a result of substantial, nafs comes as from the very beginning as a spiritual thing. The creator creates nafs independent from body, and then it belongs to the body, according to Mashai. And they believe that nafs, because it is immaterial, it is mujarrad, there is no change for it. Whether it is change as kawn و fasad, or it is tajaddud al-amthal, etc. Even haraka would not happen, because haraka needs mawzu' sabit. And as you know, in discussion about harakat al-Juhari, we have said that Masha'un had problem with harakat al-Juhari, because they thought if Johar, which is the mawzu' or the haraka, changes, then what remains there to say this is the same thing? Therefore, their idea was that accidental motion of nafs is not possible. Substantial motion of the nafs is not possible. What about other minor changes like arazi? It seems that they didn't have problem with changes in araz, like knowledge would increase. If someone was ignorant and then now knows something, then nafs is changing, but not in its substance. Or if someone was alim, now because of illness or oldness loses some of the things that he knew. Here also there is haraka in araz. So Masha'un didn't accept haraka in Jawhar, and they believe that for nafs we can consider some haraka, but we have to be very careful. It's just about accidents. What are their main arguments for the fact that soul is not changeable? One argument is that because the soul is mujarrad from the beginning, then mujarradat cannot change. Mujarradat cannot change. Why? Because change needs madda to be carrying quwwa, potentiality. If something is mujarrad, has no madda, has no potentiality, so has no haraka. Also, if something doesn't have madde, doesn't have quwwa, because madde is hamil quwwa, and therefore no haraka can change, because haraka is preceded by quwwa. Sheikh Fayyazi says, according to him, the argument has some problematic premises. For example, in second premise, they say اگر نفس مجرد باشد ماده ندارد و اگر ماده نداشته باشد قوه و استعدادی نخواهد داشت. If nafs is immaterial, doesn't have matter, and if doesn't have matter, doesn't have قوه, because madde is carrying قوه. So he says, can you hear me? Okay, alhamdulillah. Sometimes internet is interrupted and I don't realize, and so
it's okay, Ajol. We have your voice. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, thank you. So this was the second premise. if nafs is immaterial, it doesn't have madde, and if it doesn't have madde, it doesn't have quwwa, because madde is the hamil, the carrier for quwwa. But Sheikh Fayyazi says, we don't accept like this. He says, every being, whether it is material or immaterial, with respect to what it has is belfel, is actual. With respect to what it has is belquwwa. There is no need for madde. Madde is not something special, something additional. So, what is immaterial mujarrad, it can have quwwa for something else without having madde. So, this is not a problem. Also, you yourself accept haraka in a'raz, like someone becomes alim. If you accept haraka in a'raz of mujarradat are mujarrad. So you have accepted haraka in mujarrad. You say it's arazi, okay, but it's mujarrad. So the idea that there cannot be haraka in mujarradat is wrong. You have yourself showed the counterexample. Another reason that people like Ibn Sina have and other prophetic philosophers to say that nafs as jawhar cannot change is that our nafs is able to compare. For example, say this person compared to last year has made these changes. If nafs itself was not fixed, if nafs was changing, how can something which is changing compare something with what was before? It's not possible. Then the answer by Sheikh Fayyazi is that haraka has two types, as we said, imtidadi and غير imtidadi. The movement of the soul is غير امتدادي. Therefore, there is no problem to have a fixed nucleus that may grow. So there is no problem in nafs being growing. This idea that nafs cannot grow is not acceptable. Then we go to Mullah Sadra's idea, who didn't believe in Rawhaniyatul Hudus. He believed in Jismaniyatul Hudus and Rawhaniyatul Baqa for nafs. Sheikh Fayyazi says, this means that nafs at the beginning is a material being, as jism, is the madde for nafs. This madde goes through changes, and finally at certain point God brings out the soul. Therefore, there is existential unity between nafs and madde, the body. The changes that take place in nafs can be with the help of that madde, that matter which nafs belongs to, is muntabi', is somehow marked on that. So in substance of the soul and also in accidents, haraka is possible. When nafs is able to understand and perceive, it means that it has gone one step forward from being completely material, maddiya mass. Now it is material, but also misali. Little by little, if is able to have intellectual understanding, that it becomes maddi, misali, aqli, intellectual. So maddi is there, materiality of nafs is there, but it can pick up other things. So the idea of Mulla Sadra can be summarized in two things. One, substantial and accidental motion happen to soul in its material life. I repeat, substantial and accidental motion occur to or happen to nafs in its material life. Number two, Mulla Sadra says after separation of the soul and body, then the soul cannot move. The soul cannot move. Sheikh Fayyazi says, let us list arguments of Mulla Sadra. Number one, he actually mentions only two claims, as we said. We said وقوع حرکت جوهری و عرضی نفس در حیات مادی. This was number one. Occurrence of substantial and accidental motion for human soul in material life. Number two, استحاله حرکت در نفس پس از جدایی از بدن. Impossibility of the motion of the soul after separation from the body. So with respect to the first claim, that there are substantial and accidental motions for nafs in hayat maddi, in physical life, two arguments can be mentioned for Mulla Sadra, on behalf of Mulla Sadra. One is to refer to your fitra, to your vajdan, to your conscience. When you refer to your conscience, you find that your nafs is changing. For example, you didn't know something and now you know. There is enlightenment here. The second argument is based on unity of knower and the known. Nafs, by obtaining and acquiring knowledge, will be unified existentially with knowledge. So it means that before unity with knowledge, it had the potential for benefiting from that knowledge, but now is accepting that. So nafs is both maddi and mujarrad, material and immaterial, at the same time that it is simple and basit. Sheikh Fayyazi says the first argument of Mulla Sadra is based on knowledge by presence, and the second is based on ilm husuli. And we cannot have both of them together. There's no consistency here. What we can understand through knowledge by presence is that immaterial soul can evolve, can become more perfect. But then material soul can only be understood with knowledge, which is husuli, conceptual knowledge. So, is it reasonable that on the one hand you say haraka cannot be in mujarradat, on the other hand you say that the motion of the immaterial side of nafs is because of some kind of madde, because of some kind of connection with madde in the material level of nafs. So let me read again the exact wording. بنابراین آنچه بالوجدان درک می شود تنها حرکت نفس مجرد یا به بیان دیگر حرکت بعد مجرد نفس است You know, Sheikh Fayazi is happy with change of the nafs in all circumstances, even after separation from the body. So he says, we agree with Mullah Sadra that nafs is changing. But what we understand with conscience or wajdan is substantial, or you can say motion in the immaterial aspect of the nafs, not in the material side. آنچه بالوجدان درک می شود تنها حرکت نفس مجرد، یا به بیان دیگر حرکت بعد مجرد نفس است، نه بعد مادی آن. So, is it possible that you say on the one hand that it's impossible to have motion in mujarradat, like when it's separated from body, and on the other hand you say حرکت مرتبه مجرد نفس به دلیل وجود ماده. So you are accepting motion in nafs because of belonging to the body in dunya. We know the haraka is for the immaterial side. So why you are involving the body? And with respect to the second argument or second claim of Mullah Sadra, that after separation there is no haraka, so he says we don't accept this. We don't accept that something which is mujarrad cannot have haraka. So, what is his opinion after all? His opinion after all is this: human soul is mujarrad, for the arguments that we have for idrak, etc. From the beginning of its existence, forever, even after separation from body, it can have motion. There is no problem for something mujarrad to be moving. Whether it is in the position of material action with body or afterwards without the body. Possibility of haraka is in nafs always, forever. Even after death can have substantial or accidental motion. In barzakh, on the day of judgment, even in heaven and hell, nafs can change. Nafs, as long as it is nafs, can have haraka. Of course, in dunya, haraka can be partially voluntary, partially not voluntary. In barzakh and qiyamah, maybe haraka is all not voluntary. Nafs goes through haraka, but it's not something that the agent decides. Now, what is your argument? If someone asks the author, what is your argument? He says we have two arguments. Number one, again, we refer to wajdan, to human conscience. We understand by referring to ourselves through knowledge by presence that intentions and actions can affect us, can change us. So haraka in intentions, in actions, is something that we can feel it's changing us, although we are mujarrad. Second argument, we use arguments for unity of the knower and the known. If we look at the arguments for that discussion of ittihad aqil wa ma'qul, we find that harakat jawhari is possible. Haraka happens in jawhar. And none of the objections of Mullah Sadra or Allama Tabatabai are adequate according to Sheikh Fayyazi, because he doesn't believe in impossibility of haraka in mujarradat. He believes that mujarradat can have haraka. If they don't have madda, no problem. And he doesn't accept any argument about impossibility of haraka in mujarradat. Therefore, nafs can be mujarrad and have the capacity, the potential for accepting things that it lacks. If it lacks knowledge, it can accept it. If it lacks, I don't know, some skills, it can achieve. For example, someone cannot drive. It is nafs that has to learn this skill of driving, but it's okay. Also, he mentions a third reason which is not intellectual, is transmitted, is naqli. And actually, I think Sheikh Fayyazi is mostly driven by hadith and then Quran than directly by intellectual arguments. He says we have a set of hadiths which are frequently mentioned. They are mutawatir or close to mutawatir, and they all imply that human soul can change in dunya, in barzakh, and on the day of judgment. For example, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إذا مات الإنسان انقطع عمله. When someone dies, his actions will stop. إلا عن ثلاث, except with respect to three things: صدقة جارية, an ongoing charitable project; علم ينتفع به, knowledge which would be beneficial; وولد صالح يدعو له, and a righteous child who would ask forgiveness for him. So this shows that even in barzakh there is possibility of change. What we have done in dunya, or what we have built or sowed the seed, can bear fruits and affect us in barzakh. So we are going to change. So Masha'in didn't believe harakat jawhari in nafs, but they had no problem with harakat arazi. Mullah Sadra believed in harakat jawhari, had no problem, but he had problem with haraka after death. Ibn Sina had problem with harakat jawhari even before death. Mullah Sadra has no problem with harakat jawhari before death, but has problem afterwards. But Sheikh Fayyazi has no problem with harakat in jawhar, harakat in araz, in mujarrad, in maddi, in dunya, in akhirah. He has no problem. So this is the lesson about haraka in jawhar. If you have any question, any ideas, please let me know. Also, if you have managed to think about the previous topic about creation of the body before, creation of the soul, before body, for example, 2,000 years ago, etc., we can also benefit, inshallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.